completely unprocessed, nothing going on at all. And then 7 lines of C.
So what is that? What's going on there?
That is what some people call saturation and other people call distortion. And I like to call 7 lines of C. One of my favourite plugins of all time, Formula VST. If I load up Formula, it gives me something that is akin to some sort of notepad or VS Code type window. This is all what we consider linear behaviour. You know, you turn up the volume going into it and the volume will go up coming out of it. There's, you know, if you put a clean EQ, which is effectively what it is in the chain, and you boost the signal going in, it's not going to change the way it processes it coming out. If it processed it and then you turn it back down the other side, you're going to get exactly the same signal as if you put less signal in the first place. But there's a word that I love in audio engineering, and it's used all over the place in physics and computer science, particularly in neural networks and stuff like that, is non-linear. Non-linear behaviour. And non-linearities within audio produce distortion. That's how we hear it. And they produce things called harmonics. And again, that can be useful in all other applications of the world, but we're doing it in audio because that's what I know about. And you can produce harmonics and you can distort things and you can make things sound more beautiful or really awful if you want to do that using distortion. So a reason to use distortion, I'm just going to give a reason very quickly. So you're probably aware that your phone and your iPad and probably your laptop doesn't produce any low-end frequencies. It's not going to produce that sub-bass, right? But sometimes you're listening to a MacBook Pro or you're listening to an iPad and you go, oh, the bass response on this is really good. It's giving you loads of bass. Well, most, if not all of that is a trick. Your mind is being tricked. If you have 100 hertz sine wave on its own, you're not probably going to hear that off your laptop speakers. You're certainly not going to hear that off your phone speakers, right? But if you have it slightly distorted in a way that it would be in a real world situation if you plucked a guitar string or something like that, you're not just getting a pure 100 hertz tone. Music is not created just with, you know, a few pure sine waves. You know, what you end up with is you pluck that 100 hertz note and you end up with 200 hertz as the second harmonic, a little bit quieter, and 300 hertz as the third harmonic, and 400 hertz, and you get a pattern of harmonics which are all multiples of the fundamental. What happens is if you then get rid of that fundamental, the other harmonics interact in your mind and fill in what you're missing. So actually a lot of things that feel like they're producing a lot of bass are not producing a lot of bass. What they're doing is they're distorting the bass end slightly, the bottom end, the low frequencies, and producing these harmonics to fool your brain as if you're hearing them. Now, that sometimes actually happens in the device. They'll probably have code within the device of small speakers to actually do that, to give it that bass expansion you might have in your car, built into your hi-fi when you press that. But to do that requires distorting signals. And how do you distort signals? Well, let's have a look. Introduce some non-linearities. So I'm going to go back to the plugin doctor here, and I'm just going to ditch all of this and get a new formula up. So we've got a nice straight line here. So what would happen if I just square it? So if I do input times input, well, it lowers the level. But note this, we can't use this because it says linear analysis. And we're not analysing something that's linear. We're analysing something that we've already said is non-linear. So let's go to the harmonic analysis. And I've got in here is 999 hertz. It should be 1000, but for some reason Plugin Doctor won't produce exactly 1000 hertz on this slider. It's close enough. And you can see what we've done by doing input times input is it's actually showing a line at 2000 hertz. So it's almost like we've doubled the frequency. So we've created a harmonic there. So if I take that input times input and I just take it back to input, you can see that will jump back down to 1000 hertz. So what if I did input times input times input? Now I've got the original 1000 hertz signal, or 999, and I've also got a 3000 hertz signal mixed in. So we got a third harmonic, but no second harmonic. Well, this is interesting. What if I do input times input times input times input? Well, now I get no first harmonic, no fundamental, but I'm getting the second and I'm getting the fourth. So I'm getting 2000 and 4000 hertz. So again, simple mathematical operations, just squaring things, cubing things, taking things to the nth power, and we're producing interesting harmonic patterns. The even ones tend to get rid of the original signal. The odd ones seem to keep the original signal. And if you think about why, let's go to the oscilloscope here. If I go back to input equals input, we can see here, if I zoom in on this, we can see a nice little sine wave. What happens if I do input times input? Well, it's reducing it down massively. Let me try and boost that up and you'll see. And you'll see it's now offset. It's not centered anymore. And why is that? What happens if you square a negative number?
Oh, it goes positive.
It goes positive. So by input times input, we're making everything sit above the zero line. So what would have been
because it's logarithmic, it starts as a minus. Is that right?
Well, no, because the wave data would go up to 1, down to -1, up to 1, down to -1. And when we square it, all that stuff becomes plus. So effectively, it's almost like you're doubling the frequency, hence you get this second harmonic. So then you can do things, so that's called asymmetrical distortion. So second, fourth, sixth, eighth harmonics are asymmetrical, and stuff that's third, fifth, the odd harmonics becomes symmetrical. But if we wanted to keep the symmetry of that, you could have something, for example, we could say float sine. So we're going to keep the sign of the number and we're going to assume that it's positive, and then we're going to say if input is less than 0, then we're going to do sine equals -1. So we're going to flip the sign if it's that. And then we're going to say input times input, which we know is going to be positive. And then I want to multiply that by the sign, so that if it's flipped it, it will go back. And if it hasn't flipped it, it won't, because it's just multiplying it by 1. And we can see now that asymmetrical thing has changed into something that is now symmetrical. But you see how it's got all this weird shaping. Let me go into just a little bit closer into it. And we've got this weird shaping there.
That's because the one that's pointing up was actually a pointing down one.
Yes, so you can see there, that was that, and that's kind of been squared as if it was pointing up, and we've got these little cut-off points here where it's because these were very low values, the squaring of it obviously doesn't do as much, and then the higher the value, the squaring of it does more. So we're introducing these curves versus, if I just click here and say, in fact, I could just do dry wet. You see, if I go back to the dry signal, you can see it all starts to smooth out, and we go back to the wet signal, and it's squashing it, and it's wave shaping, and it's changing the shape. And if we look here in the harmonic analysis, we can see just by squaring it and then changing the sign back, we've got the third, the fifth, we've got a massive pattern of harmonics there. In which case, if we were trying to write some software to fool an end user to believe that they were hearing sub-bass when they weren't, so let's take the frequency right down to low. So if you had a 50 hertz bass drum that's kicking away, and you're a developer that wants your small laptop speakers to sound like it's got a load of 50 hertz that doesn't exist, you could write something that takes that frequency range, does a distortion pattern, then clears that out to fool your brain. And these are things that people, I'm not saying exactly this code or but these are things that computer scientists are doing all the time, and plugin designers, they're always trying to make interesting ways to mimic what's happening in real physical bits of equipment, because a lot of people want to send things virtual. So for a final example, let's actually take some of this code. If I just copy that code there, right, and put that over the drums. Let's see what it sounds like on drums. It will sound pretty bad, I'd imagine, but let's see.
Sounds like someone's kicked the speaker in.
Yeah. Yeah, you can hear it's distorted. And those little splutters every time the what's called a transient, which is like where you hit the snare, hit the bass drum or whatever, those little transient splutters might be nice to mix in subtly because they might calm down your wave and just bring the tops of your waves in, which means you can make the signal louder. And by introducing those extra harmonics at the top, it will make those things kick a bit more. Now that's one reason to use that in audio. Now I find that that's not the best way to get a convincing distortion. Actually, a better way, in some ways, the oldest way, is just by clipping. So you've got a waveform like that, and you just want to clip the top and you want to clip the bottom. So when it gets to there, it gets stuck, flat lines, comes down to there, flat lines, and we'll just clip it in. So, and there's another way you could do it. You can also take the square root. We've been squaring it here. But if I took the square root of that, it would sound very, very different. In fact, I think I'll show you. I've pre-prepared a square root version of that, so I don't have to code it all up. So here's a clipping one, which is quite fun. And here's just a different kind of distortion here. This is putting it to the power of 1/10, which will different flavour of distortion. But where does that become fun? And this is the final example. This is where I finish off the video. It's not just about sort of distorting drums or doing whatever. Things that you listen to in your favourite songs like guitar and bass and vocals, they've all got a little bit of distortion because nothing in the real world is completely free of distortion. So what I thought I would do was use that distortion that I just wrote. Let's load the clipping distortion, which just basically chops the top and the bottom off the waves and does it up. And I've also got, written by me here, I've got a noise gate, so anything below a certain threshold will just be zeroed out. I've also got, not written by me, a delay in formula. And I've also got written...
a bit like an echo, a delay.
Yeah, a bit of a delay, so it goes like, and it repeats. And then I've got here a much better 3-band EQ that someone wrote into formula. So this is all using stuff that you can see C code of. Let's grab a guitar. I'm going to turn my distortion off. So I'll turn this up a bit. So if I get rid of the int. Yeah, there's very little going on there. It's just a straight DI'd guitar sound. And then I just put in the gate, which all that does is just chop out any noise. And it is actually giving it a bit of crunch, probably with my bad code. And then I'm going to put in the delay. So you can hear it, delay. Put a bit of EQ. And then my distortion, which needs gaining up a tiny bit, but this is literally how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of code, one of which is just returning. I mean, it could be done in a lot less lines of code. So let's just turn up the input gain, let's turn up the output gain, let's see what this sounds like. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Being able to play with audio like that, literally in a plugin, just start writing C. So I wanted to introduce you to that because I think there's some people out there who do a bit of coding and like music and also like other sort of data processing would find that interesting. Averaging formula. So, and if I now hit play on that, we've lost some treble.
Oh, so the highest frequency is on the right. So that's
the highest
down,
frequencies, and that's coming down.
as we saw before with the drums.
So I don't think anyone's going to be impressed with that.